was a day long feared in the capital. At Aldgate East, where the injured were treated on the pavement outside the station.
Please, if you're not being treated by any paramedic, please...
At King's Cross, where hundreds were moved to safety, having escaped the horrors below ground. And at Russell Square, what was left of the number 30 bus. Across the very heart of London, there was shock, confusion, and an almost palpable sense of fear among those caught up in the moment. The unthinkable had become reality. Below ground, in the pale emergency light, hundreds made their way through the tube carriages, a sense of claustrophobia all too apparent. Passengers battling smoke and soot. Scenes like these repeated in dozens of carriages in the 3 tube trains stuck deep in the tunnel system. Those that had escaped made their way onto the streets on the surface, traumatised.
Because all the windows came in and smashed and people are coming, and my window didn't break and I got a seat. I think the worst is people standing.
So I have no idea. It was just black and we just got out, so we have no idea.
What did you hear after the explosion?
People just screaming.
You saw the carriage and it was literally the roof and the side was all over the place, and there were people like in underwear, like with their bodies covered with blood, and it was awful.
Yeah, and there's people just screaming and just asking for help, and the underground staff were trying to get the people that were safe just to walk out, and they weren't actually going into those carriages. The carriages were filled with this like dusty smoke.
With the entire tube system shut down and buses struggling to cope with crowds fleeing the area, London's road network was targeted. One of the capital's signature red double-decker buses was hit. The force of the explosion ripping the roof from the vehicle. Casualties were expected to be heavy. This was the scene captured by a passerby less than a minute after the explosion. The force of the blast blew passengers from their seats aboard the bus and left injured strewn across the road.
Just walking down through to central London, didn't even notice the bus. I just went across the road and then, just blown off my feet and stuff.
In a capital where people had woken up full of pride following yesterday's Olympic bid success, the horror of the attack was perhaps even more deeply felt. A coordinated series of bomb attacks above and below ground, targeting London's transport system with predictably appalling consequences. London's emergency services have had years to prepare for this disaster, and the biggest casualty evacuation ever seen on the streets of the capital quickly got underway. Police warning there could be further attacks.
We don't know if this is over yet. We've got to remain vigilant. The public have got to help the police and report anything that they see as suspicious to make sure we can deal with everything straight away. But we've got every resource out there at the moment, and we're doing our very best to keep London safe.
At Gleneagles, the G8 leaders stood shoulder to shoulder with Tony Blair. Later, back in London, the Prime Minister addressed the nation, promising to bring those responsible to justice.
There will, of course, now be the most intense police and security service action to make sure that we bring those responsible to justice. I would also pay tribute to the stoicism and resilience of the people of London who have responded in a way typical of them.
By late afternoon, the emergency services confirmed that all those trapped below ground had been brought up to safety. A senior police officer admitted recently it's not a question of if terrorists will hit the capital, only when. Tragically, that prophecy was realised on the streets of the capital this morning. Peter Sharp, Sky News.